Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of My Name is Dad. It has been a while since you have heard my voice over Spotify, but I am back. I'm going to record a couple. I've been busy with work, and it's summertime, and the kids are out of school, so we did some vacationing. So we went on a cruise. We did the 4-night cruise, or the 4-day cruise to Ensenada, Catalina Island, and Ensenada, Mexico. So that was a really fun time for me and my kids. Then we also did a camping trip for 4th of July and everything. So we just got back from that, and I have just a little bit of time before my next kind of big job that I'm starting, which I'm hoping to start tomorrow. But the guy called and said he had his tractor broke down, so they're delayed a day. So I was like, oh, I'm going to record some podcasts today. So that's what I decided to do. Okay. If you don't know, I'm the host, Brandon Benson. And I just turned 42 years old on June 30th. So thank you very much for that. I still feel 40. So 40, 41, 42 doesn't make a difference to me. So I took just like a month off of doing the podcast because just had some stuff going on, was busy with work, and I said then some vacation and stuff like that. But I'm back. I feel refreshed. It is the middle of summer here in Phoenix. So if you do hear like a breeze in the background, it's just a fan blowing on me because it's super hot. Yeah, I even had to listen to the last episode that I did because I wanted to make sure where I left off. And where we left off was I was just kind of basically getting done with Mac Tools, getting out of that business. And so this is like kind of just like a really super low point in my life. Basically couldn't afford the rental house no more. Had to move back to my parents. Miss White had dumped me because I was such a loser, because I lost my career, my job, and had to move back to my parents. So she was like, this guy sucks. So she dumped me, and I was like really, I was really kind of, I'm not going to say I was depressed, but I was really kind of like out of shape and had put on a bunch of weight because just not eating well and drinking all the time, kind of, and getting a little bit older. Not as young as I used to be. I'm probably like, I'm guessing maybe 25 at this point, maybe 26, but let's just say I'm 25. That sounds about right. And so I moved back to my parents, and I don't take it. I guess maybe I just kind of lived my 20s, in a phase of depression or something in a way. But I wasn't really that mentally hurt by my situation. I don't know. I just kind of thought like, all right, that's just how it goes for me. Right. That's just how it is. You just keep failing at stuff or it doesn't work out, whatever it is. It was just another bump on the log. But I kind of thought like, okay, I kind of need to change my life here a little bit. So basically, what happened was, the first thing that happened was, my mom was like, let's diet. And I was like, all right, let's diet. So she ordered up the Nutrisystem. This is when Nutrisystem was huge. And it really did work for me. I definitely ate less and I lost some weight and stuff. And then I kind of just decided, I was like, okay, I got to have a career change. What am I going to do? And I decided, I was like, what do I like? What do I like to do? I said, well, I like sports. Maybe I should work in sports. Any job. I didn't really care. As long as I was just like, I just want to do, I didn't care about money anymore. I was like, I'm never going to be rich. I just want to be happy. I just want to do something that I like to do. That was my main goal. So I said, I like sports. And I said, I'm going to look up all the local like sports teams in my area. And that's what I did. There was like the hockey team in Fresno. There was the baseball team in Modesto, the baseball team in Visalia. I don't know if there's any other ones, but I'm sure maybe there was one or two more. And I just started sending emails just like, hey, I'm looking for a job, I'll do whatever, just let me know. And I got a couple emails back, but then, I got one from Visalia. They were the Visalia Oaks at the time. They were the single A affiliate for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I got an email from the general manager lady Her name's Jen. And she was like, yeah, just come on out and we'll, set up an interview. And I did. So I sent up an interview, drove out there and just met with her and talked to her for a while. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. Whatever, And she's like, well, we kind of need some help. We just need some help with like stadium operations and the grounds and stuff. Those guys are just by themselves. They got all this work to do and they're just doing it by themselves. Like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'm kind of handy. I can handle that. So that's what I did. But what you don't know is when you work in the minor leagues, especially when you start, you're technically it's an internship. So you don't really get paid. You just kind of more volunteer your time. I basically started there in February. This would have been February 2008, maybe? Yeah, 2009, 10, 11, maybe 2008. Yeah, February 2008, maybe 2009, whatever it was. And, the season was going to start in the spring. So it was going to start in April. And I started in February, and I just drove over there. Just drove, and I just worked. I remember my first day, we painted like the handrails, and we painted like the steps, like the yellow stripes on the steps, and we hung banners, and I just helping out, and just part of the crew, and making new friends and stuff like that. But I really started to help out the groundskeeper a lot because he was doing a lot of work, and he was basically by himself. So I started helping him a lot. And he was a super nice guy. His name was Tommy. He was from Minnesota. I do remember that. And super nice guy. I'm still friends with him to this day. And so I started helping him. And then as the season went on, I got more involved. And I just basically lived at the stadium just because I had nothing else to do. And obviously the owner, general manager, really loved that because I was basically working for free. And I basically spent 10 to 12 hours a day working for him. So the season goes on, and I was like, man, I really like doing this. This is like super cool, and I really like the ground stuff. And I kind of like started looking around, and it just happened to turn out that the local junior college, community college, which is the College of Sequoias in Visalia, there had a landscape management 2-year degree program, and I was like, this is awesome. So I said, this is something I think I'm going to do. So I basically, and this is, it's like kind of getting into the summertime. That's baseball season, summertime. School starts in August, right? So I just basically go to my dad, and my dad always kind of had a rule that, if we wanted to go to college or something like that, he would pay for it. So I asked him, I said, hey, I just met with my dad, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and this is my plan. I really like this baseball thing and doing the grounds, and they have this program at COS, and I think I really want to do it. And I was like, will you pay for my classes? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So I would sign up for the classes and send him the bill, and he'd pay it off. I mean, this is like junior college, not that all that expensive. But yeah, so that's basically what I did. Once school started in August, it was still my first season at the Rawhide, or at the Visalia Oak. The Visalia Oaks eventually changed their name to the Rawhide, so I will call them the Rawhide probably from now on. And I would go to school in the morning from 8 to noon, and then I would go over and work at the ballpark all day and all night. And that's what I did. And the COS program, the landscape management program, the ornamental horticulture program was amazing. I absolutely loved it there. My teacher, Mr. Fernandez, was awesome. You could just tell he was just one of those teachers where he was just super excited about what he was teaching, and he just loved the coursework, and man, it was amazing. I still, every once in a while, I would kind of email him. Even now, I just kind of give him an email and update about what I am, and where I'm going, and what I've done. And, just kind of like one of those, like, just give him updates just because, I loved it. He was just like such a good inspiration for me and a motivator. And he just taught me so much. So that's what I did. I went there, and yeah, I graduated from College of Sequoias with my 2-year degree in landscape management in 2 years. I did it in 2 years, knocked it out of the park. But I remember my first year at the Rawhide, that first season. I remember at one point, it was probably like when I started school, it was like halfway through the year, and I remember the the owner of the team, the general manager, he came up to me. He's like, Brandon, you're doing a great job. We really love having you around and everything. And I was just happy to be there. And again, I didn't give a shit about the money, but he was like, I'm going to give you a raise. And I was like, well, I'm not making anything right now. He goes, I'm going to give you $50. I think it was like $50 a week or something like that, or $50 a month. And I was like, that's awesome. I think it was $50 a week. And I was like, man, that's awesome. I was so happy. I can buy beer again. This is amazing, So that was really cool. And so then the first year we kind of finished up the first season, and it goes to the off season. I just kept going to school in the off season. And I just met so many good people working in the minor leagues, and I just really kind of like fell in love with it. And on a lot of my earlier episodes, I talk about I never had a purpose. I didn't have a goal in life. But now that I found this, I was like, this is what I think I really want to do. And I could see a future. I could see, me either staying in Visalia for a long time or moving somewhere else, somewhere I've never been, some other city that with some baseball team or a football team or something like that, working the grounds and seeing the country and meeting new people. I just absolutely fell in love with it. And just meeting all the new people and all my new friends and stuff. It was just, it was just so refreshing. And I lost like a ton of weight that summer because I just worked and I was so poor I couldn't eat. I basically ate the Nutrisystem that my mom bought me. And I worked and I lost a bunch of weight and all that stuff and was feeling good. And, the baseball team, the people who work, the front office people who work there, they like to drink beer. We went out for beers all the time. It was just really, really, really fun. This is also, it reminds me of drinking beer all the time, but this is also the first time I kind of got or my only time, I kind of got a DUI. It's kind of a stupid story, but so I was still living at my parents'. They lived in Lemoore, and I had to drive all the way to Visalia. So at the end of the game, I'd have to drive home. And I remember my regular car was broken down and was in the shop for whatever reason. And so I was borrowing one of my parents, like their backup cars. And this was like, the old red Ford F-150. It was like the pre-runner one, and it was always beat up and dusty and dirty. But that was all I had to get to work and to school. It was after a game, and we always went out for some beers at the end of the homestand. So, like a homestand would be like 6 games in a row, right? And then at the end, we would always go out for a couple beers. And I remember this was probably getting like late in the summer, towards the end of the season. And I remember I was just like, man, I am tired. But we always go out for a couple beers. So that's what we did. I think we went out, and I think I had 2 beers. It was 2 pints, so 2 16-ounces. And I was like, man, guys, I'm just super tired. I'm going to go home. And, it's a, 30, 40-minute drive home back to Lemoore to my parents' house. I was like, I'm going to go home. I was like, thought nothing of it. And so as I get back to Lemoore, I'm like, man, I'm hungry. Oh, then, the Jack in the Box is open 24 hours. So I'm just going to pull in there. And I pulled in to the parking lot, and the line was super long. And I was like, fuck. All right, well, I'm just going to go home. I don't want to wait, And so I pulled out, and there's a signal light. There's a 4-way signal light. And then I make a left, and all of a sudden, boom, I get lit up, by a sheriff, And they pulled me over, and I'm like, oh, God, man, it's just making my night longer now, And I felt totally fine. And, they're like, did you, license, registration, blah, 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 And then like, do you have anything to drink? And I was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I did. Yeah, but I was like, yeah, I had 2 pints of beer. It's been 45 minutes. And, yeah, I'm totally fine. Like, I was like, this is cakewalk, Like, they're going to just test me, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to sleep because I'm super tired. And so, they get me out and do all the sobriety tests. And the funny thing is, as I'm standing there doing these like sobriety test stuff on the side of the road, this other like Chevy Silverado pickup truck pulls up and just stops right next to us. And the cop looks at me and he's like, do you know who that is? I was like, I have no idea who that is. And the guy was just like sitting there just looking at us. And I was like, this is weird. And they're like, hey, so the guy, there were 2 sheriffs the one sheriff was like, hey, buddy, why don't you pull over too, since you're so curious about what we're doing here? And this guy was hammer drunk. I mean, hammer drunk, you know? And I was talking to the cops we were kind of laughing about and stuff. So it finally comes down that I'm going to do the breathalyzer. I'm like, finally, I can go home. So I do the breathalyzer, and the guy's like, okay, you know, you do it once, and then you do it again. They'd make you do it twice. And he goes, all right, man, we're going to have to place you under arrest because you blew a .084. And I was like, well, where the hell did the fucking 4 come from? I didn't know they went to the third decimal point, you know? I was like, oh, God, this is terrible. And, you know, and I was like, son of a bitch. You know, so they drive me all the way down to the county jail, throw me in the drunk tank, which I'm not drunk because I had 2 16-ounce beers an hour ago at this point now, at least an hour ago. And I'm like, God. And I remember, you know, and so what happens is we're there, and the other guy who pulled up next to us, they get him out, and this guy's like can barely stand, and and it's like, this guy's so stupid. This guy just could have went home, and he had to stop and was just like, you know, rubbernecking, just seeing what was going on. And this guy was super drunk, so they arrest him right away. He was obviously drunk, so they take both of us down to the county jail. And we get processed and everything. And we get there, and they're like, are you the one that just stopped and pulled over? I was like, no. I was like the original guy. They're like, oh, okay. You know, but everyone was super nice because they could tell I was pretty much, I was super coherent. I was, you know, just talking to people and stuff. And they throw me in the drunk tank, which is like, just like this, like, kind of like padded room and stuff. And I remember there was like these kind of like drunk hobo guys in there. And one of them wakes up kind of like from his stupor, you know, and he looks at me and he goes, what are you doing here? And I was like, you know, I just got here. He's like, you're not even drunk. And I was like, I know, man. Tell me about it. You know? So I don't know how they let me out in the morning at some point, a couple hours later. And even I remember when I was getting like fingerprinted and stuff, I remember the sheriff doing the fingerprint. He's like, yeah, dude, like, you don't even smell like booze or nothing like that. And I was like, yeah, I know. But, you know, it is what it is. You know, it happened, you know. So, of course, you know, you have to go to court and all these things. And I did. And I was like, you know, it is what it is. I didn't really want to fight it. You know, I thought about it just because, you know, it was so close. But, you know, when I had my public defender, she was like, nah, you know, you're going to fight it. And, you know, the county, you know, they've been kind of, you know, fighting back and all this stuff. But she goes, you're a borderline because, you know, you were like .084 on the breathalyzer, you know. So what happens is they offer me a plea deal, which basically it's called a wet and reckless, which basically how it works is I would plead guilty to reckless driving with alcohol involved. And it wouldn't count as a DUI on my record, but I still had to do some of the classes and, you know, pay a bunch of fines and stuff like that. But if I got if I got a DUI later, that one would count as a second. It'd be like counted as my second DUI. But like on my record, you know, it wouldn't say that there was. But you know, that was kind of like the deal. So I said, that's fine. You know, it is what it is. You know, I blew a .084. I can't deny it, you know. But so I said that, you know, I said that just kind of sounds fair or whatever. I you know, do the crime, you got to do the time. So that's what I did. And but it didn't affect anything really at my work. You know, I still you know, they had the deal where your license is suspended, but you're allowed to go to school and to work. So, and that's basically all I did anyways. So it didn't really affect me that much, except, you know, a lot of money and time I had to spend going to the classes and stuff. But so that's going into the second season. So I was so now we're kind of like in the off season, going into the second season of the baseball season. I was still going to school, and that's basically all I did. Going into the second season, you know, I got called by the general manager, the owner, and he was like, hey, you know, we really like to have you come back. And they had a new head groundskeeper, and this guy was kind of kind of dumb, didn't really know what he was doing. He was like, you've been around and we really like to have you come back and help out again. I said, yeah, but I can't do it for $15 a week, He goes, okay, well, come on in and we'll talk about it. I said, okay. So I go in and, we kind of like, I think maybe I got up like $300 a week or $600 every 2 weeks, something like that. I said, okay, I can do this, And actually, with some support from my parents, I was actually able to get a super cheap in the ghetto apartment in Visalia. So I had my own place, a little 1-bedroom, and it was actually really, really close to the school that I went to. So it was super nice. So I actually lived in Visalia that whole next year. And then that next year, so in the minor leagues, every year they get like different new interns. So there was like a whole new crop of people that came in and met new people, met new friends, because you work with these people in the minor leagues so much. You spend all day, and we're all poor. A lot of these kids are just straight out of college. So they're all younger than me, but, they're all in their early 20s. They just graduated college. I'm kind of mid-20s. I'm going to college. But it was just like these people were all poor. We all love beer. We all love baseball. It's just a super great time. They're all from different parts of the country. It was like I met all these different, I was just like, I was so secluded in my little Central Valley there that I just got all these different perspectives and all these things and everything. So it was a really, really fun time to work in the minor leagues and everything. So kind of what happens is during that second season, I was still, getting in good shape and feeling good and still poor, so I didn't eat, so I was still kind of losing weight and stuff like that. But then one day, I got the call that my friend David, who went on the cruise with me, he had passed away. And it was a tough time because David was a really close friend of mine. He was kind of like one of my golfing buddies, and, he went on the cruise, and he was my golfing buddy, and we would, it was always kind of like when one of us would call and be like, hey, you want to go golfing? It was always like, yeah, someone might have something to talk about, But sometimes there wasn't always a serious thing to talk about. It was just, we haven't seen you for a while. Let's go. But I got the call. My friend David had passed away. Again, he was a diabetic. We're not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure what the cause was. I heard maybe a blood clot, something like that. I don't know. But it was definitely a sad time. But what happens is I go to the funeral, and Miss White also went to the funeral, and Miss Peacock was also there too. I remember now. So I actually, the night of the funeral, me and Miss Peacock went out and we got drunk and, kind of talked about the old times and doing that kind of thing. But after that funeral, Miss White gives me another call. And I think maybe that's where we'll leave off, and we'll pick up next episode with the return of Miss White and me continuing to work for the minor league team. All right. Thanks again for listening. This podcast is exclusively on Spotify, and see you on the next episode. Thanks. Bye.